Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Yeah.
You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Orange and blue, Til Mets Do Us Part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty, Til Mets Do Us Part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple, Til Mets Do Us Part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show, Til Mets Do Us Part. John from Brooklyn, Ibby reps NJ. With the other team, I don't care what your friends say. Mets fans, we focus like a sensei. Listen to the podcast Monday, Wednesday. Made a couple bad plays, but we still won. Character, yup, we're gonna build some. Are you gonna check the pod? Is real fun. Just like Mookie, I will, son. So invest with your heart. Orange and blue, Til Mets Do Us Part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty, Til Mets Do Us Part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple, Til Mets Do Us Part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show.
Available now on all streaming platforms. If you love the New York Mets, check out Til Mets Do Us Part. Enough rapping. Let's get to yapping.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back into another episode of Til Mets Do Us Part. We are coming to you guys live. John and Ibby back together again. I know it was just 2 weeks ago, but we are back together again. And now for the foreseeable future, my schedule has finally normalized a little bit. I will be back in the States. I will not be traveling all over the place trying to do this show at 2 o'clock in the morning, which I guess is good news for some of you and for other folks who don't like me as much as they like Ibby and some of the guests who have been on here from Subway to Shea, Tone, Keith, Shea and Sons. You know, if you don't like me as much as them, sorry, you're stuck with me because I am back. John Saponaro out in Los Angeles, California. Matt Ibanez holding it down back in New Jersey. Ibby, it looks like we're having a little trouble going live on Twitter right now. I was trying to mess with it as we were going live, but we are live on YouTube. We'll see if we could sort that while we're live. But may not be able to get that sorted in time, but it's all good because we got our Twitter folks in here in the chat, our YouTube folks here in the chat, and of course we'll drop later on as an audio podcast for all the people who go ahead and listen that way. But Ibby, it's been a couple weeks, man. How you doing?
I'm doing well, John. It's good to have you back. It's been a minute. I know you said it's only been 2 weeks, but it's been disjointed, so it feels like it's been longer. But yes, we've been having a lot of fun with some of the guests that we've had on. Always a good time having Ant on, having a great conversation with him, and of course our other guests as well. But it is nice to have, the team back at full force as we are, coming in closer, man. In terms of the trade deadline, we're a week away. Our Mets are in the hunt. This is the season has been wild. It's like we said at the start of the year. It was always going to be a roller coaster ride, and what we've been on and what certain players have been providing. We're going to talk about them today. And what this team might do. Like David Stearns has a very, very tall task in front of him. I'm very curious to see how he goes about handling it. And I'm excited to have that conversation with you. So let's get into it. Let's do it.
Absolutely. And I was able to go live on your channel, not able to go live on the show channel, which is weird. I don't know.
The show channel on my end. I know you're right. It's not there.
It's saying that we need a premium's Twitter subscription in order to go live now, which is something we've never done in the past. I'll just say this right now on the show real quick. Fuck Elon Musk. Anyway, let's talk about the Mets. We'll figure that out. Hopefully we'll get Twitter fired back up. I tried to switch it from your account to the show account. It didn't work. It doesn't matter. If you want to watch it on Twitter, you can pop over to Ibby's account. We're trying to sort this out. Stuff changes all the time. It's all bullshit. Anyway, let's talk about our New York Mets. Of course, the New York Mets won a big game last night against the crosstown rivals. Unfortunately, it is not a big game because it doesn't count unless the Mets did win it. So now it's our World Series. You know how it works. From a Yankees perspective, it either matters or it doesn't matter. Depending on if the Yankees win, it matters. If the Yankees lose, it doesn't matter. It is all just bullshit. But I'm really happy that the Mets were able to take another win, improved to 3-0 against the Yankees, not because it's the Yankees, Ibby, but because these games are super important. The NL wildcard race is very tight right now. After the Mets get done with the Yankees, tonight they have a long series with the Braves, and the Mets are going to be in a position where maybe they could jump the Braves, depending on how today goes and how that series goes. So, I don't care about the Subway Series. Yeah, it's nice to beat your crosstown rival. It's nice to go to the games if you're there. I was going to try to do it, but I had to get back to LA sooner than I wanted to. But look, the games matter. All the games count in the second half. And the Mets had a gutty win out of the break. They have not exactly been firing on all cylinders offensively the way they were headed into the break. And look, you got to give credit where credit is due. The Stones. The absolute stones on Jake Diekman. Look, Diekman's been the source of much ire for a lot of Mets fans, but this guy, I don't know if you want to say when it mattered most, but kind of. You know, your best reliever is not available. The Mets are injured in the bullpen. The Mets had to get to the ninth inning. And I got to give credit to Carlos Mendoza as well for looking at the matchups and saying, maybe it's not ideal, but this is the way we've got to kind of position ourselves with potentially the two lefties coming up in the ninth inning. And you know, so I tip my cap to Mendoza and a huge hat tip to Jake Diekman. Maybe this is the catalyst he needs to kind of hit the ground running. I don't know. We'll see.
It was sitting down, watching that, and then hearing how, I want to say at one point, like Ronnie said on the broadcast, he was like, Diekman's going to come in right behind. I'm like, oh my God, this game's going to come down to Diekman with Soto and Judge. And I'm just like, this ends in absolute disaster. Walks Soto, and then I'm sitting there. And I don't know if you were, John. I think I did see that you put out a tweet. I didn't tweet it because I was just sitting there, and I said it in our group chat. I was just screaming at the TV, and then within our chat saying, walk him.
I said it. I said walk him anyway, and then I retweeted myself and said, "Look at this fucking idiot," because I was wrong. But I would have. I absolutely
would have walked him too because of what the back end of that lineup, besides those two guys, have done. I would rather Ben Rice beat me, somebody else beat me within that lineup. Like, I'm not going to let you in a huge spot beat me. And the fact that he comes in and he pumps, I can't even say pumps, it was like a 94-mile-an-hour fastball right down Broadway for the first strike. And I'm like, holy shit, like my heart's pounding as I'm watching it, mixed in a couple of changeup and finishes on him on the inside looking. And I was just like, holy shit, like this might be our night. And then, ends up, he shuts the door, gets saved. Absolutely wild, even more wild in Mendoza in the post game when asked the question, hey, why didn't you walk Judge? He goes, I don't know. Like he was just like, I kind of just like, sometimes when you're in that moment, just like, just go do it. And then sure enough, he gets rewarded. There've been times we've seen throughout the season where Mendoza has been very ballsy when it comes to sticking with a guy or really believing in someone and going with it. In that moment, it kind of felt as though he was like, I kind of just went with it, and it worked. And like you always say, and I agree with you, you don't give wins back. They are what they are. The guy got the K. Fantastic win. Build off of it. We talked about it in our chat this morning. Ant was saying it. I was echoing it as well. Like, no matter what people think about the Subway Series, it doesn't matter. This wild card race matters. Now it's getting into the thick of things. We're getting towards the deadline. You got to win these games. The foot is on the throat. Push down. I know Cole's on the mound tonight. Like, I don't care. McNeil needs to deliver. He has delivered recently when it comes to innings to protect the bullpen. I'm assuming that Buto and Diaz are available tonight, which is even better for the back end. This is a big game. Go out there and win a ball game.
Absolutely. And look, shout out to Jose Quintana, too, who did enough. He did what he needed to do.
Yeah.
He threw one bad pitch to Gleyber Torres, and Gleyber Torres hit a Yankee Stadium home run. And look, they all count, so it's fine. But, look, that's a ball that doesn't go out in most other ballparks. But in fairness, the one that Ben Rice hit later in the game goes out in almost every other ballpark. He hit it to left center field, and that's the deepest part of Yankee Stadium. And I think that's the deepest left center field in the sport. So that probably goes out. So, obviously you get what you can get and you take what you get at the time. So, but Quintana did exactly what he needed to do. The Mets did exactly what they needed to do. Look, you'd love to come out of the break and beat the Marlins 3 out of 4. Or dare I say sweep them. The Marlins are not very good. But the Marlins always stick in our sides. And the Marlins are, I think, I don't know if Jazz tweeted this the other day because he's probably the only person with Marlin fandom that I follow. And I know some of the folks that we deal with are not too thrilled on Jazz. But look, I think he said this the other day. He said the Marlins are good enough to beat anybody. They're just not good enough to do it enough, right? Like, and
Right.
I think that's a fair assessment of the Marlins. Like, the Marlins have some talent on their
And it's
team.
always against the Mets. It's
And
always
they always
click
get up
against
for the
the
Mets. So look, you take the split in the 4-game series. I don't know who said this. It was ages ago. It was a path. It might have been Ron Darling. There was like a path to 100 wins, and it's like if you win all your series, and like it's something you could never do. But it's like if you win all of your 3-game series at home, and you split all of your 4-game and 2-game series, something like that, it opens up your path to 100 wins. I'm bastardizing it, but basically it's hard to sweep a 4-game series. It's hard to win a 4-game series. So to get out of there with a split, I don't care what it looks like, because like you said, you don't throw the wins back. Now that said, they have an opportunity here to take another game from the Yankees. They would go 4-0 on the season with the Yanks. I think that would be a nice little feather in the cap for Mets fans, more so than anybody else. But again, the team needs to win. The team set themselves way far back in May. They came climbing back in June, but they still have to keep the hammer down, like you said. So they got to keep pushing, and I think they're in a position to do it. Look, Garrett Cole was not good. We got him the first start back, I think, from the IL. He's been much, much, much better in the month since we faced him. But if Manaea does his job and keeps us in the game, this Yankee team is not very good. They've got a couple. Holmes is good. Weaver is good. Soto and Judge are the 2 best players in the American League, hands down. Garrett Cole is Garrett Cole. We'll see what he gives. Heel is good. He was good again yesterday, but that's kind of it, man. They don't really have a whole lot. Ben Rice looks like he might be a player, but it's too soon to tell. Thank you, Armand. We've been ignoring the chat a little bit. That was Garrett Cole's second start back. Appreciate that. Ibby, look, the Mets, with 1 week to go until the trade deadline, I guess 6 days to go until the trade deadline. We haven't seen a ton of moves, and we can talk about that coming up in a minute. The Mets are in a position, just keep doing what you've been doing, and they should be buyers. Should, period.
1,000% be buyers. And just to backtrack real quick before we get into that talk, when it came to some of the things that happened in the game last night, just if you want, especially if you want to beat Garrett Cole tonight, you have to be able to cash in when you have runners on. And the Mets did a poor job last night when they had runners on base. Huge stones, using stones as the analogy that we did before. Huge stones on Weaver, getting those 2 strikeouts. I was talking with one of my Yankee friends. He was awesome. He was awesome, and he really worked out of a big jam. So shout out to him on that. But the Mets got to cash in those spots, because if you want to be, if you want to play with the big boys, you want to be one of those teams, you have to be able to cash in when you have runners on, especially when you're facing someone like Cole tonight. So hopefully that they get things proper and they can, start hitting a little bit better when it comes to runners in scoring position. But to your point, absolutely, like 1,000% buyers at this point. There's been a lot of things written so far. Will Sams put some stuff out on The Athletic about how the approach for this team might be, buying and selling at the same time. I know Jeff Passan put something out as well, how they might be buying and selling at the same time, and not being afraid to deal away from the Major League roster. Now, you mentioned it on Twitter. I agree with it. We could talk about it now if you want. Things have changed because of the Christian Scott injury. So everyone always thought, well, the Mets have some stars. Maybe they deal from the stars to help themselves elsewhere, what have you. That kind of changes the chemistry now because you don't have Christian Scott. Kodai Senga's coming back, which is great. You still want to work that 6-man rotation. What are you going to do? Are you bringing Tyler McGill back up? Are you going to take Jose Butto out of the role that he was in, that he's in now? Like, I kind of like Butto where he is right now, even though him as a starter is good. But the back, it really depends on what you do in terms of the bullpen. Will you go out and shop for another arm? Will you call Chicago and see if you can re-engage on Eric Fetty, since those were the 2 teams essentially that were after him in the offseason? Like, is that something that you want to do? Are you going to go full bore and attack some of the bigger relievers out there? I don't think that they will. I still think that this team is going to buy, and I'm still calling it a soft buy. Now, when I say soft buy, I'm talking more so in terms of names. I'm not saying that this team is going to go out there, dump the farm out in division to go get Tanner Scott. I don't think that's happening. Like, they're not calling Oakland and dumping everything out to get Mason Miller. We all love Mason Miller. He's electric. Would love to see him here, but I don't think that's happening. You're looking more on the lower end of the spectrum in terms of arms. The Peter Fairbanks of the Rays, the Lucas Ursich is from Oakland. Like, I think those are the types of names that you're going to get. You want to call it like a Stern special. He finds these types of guys. He targets certain players. I think you're looking more so at that as opposed to the bigger names that are out there right now, but buying nonetheless.
Yeah, look, I said this a couple different times on Twitter, and I stand by this. And I'll reiterate it here. I know a lot of you follow me on X and stuff like that, and I appreciate that, but I think it bears saying out loud. The Mets need to buy, because whenever you're in a position to win, winning matters. Going for it matters. Now, that doesn't mean that you push all your chips into the middle, and some of you might argue that I'm making a semantics argument here, but the Mets need to buy because you cannot just punt on seasons. The MLB right now rewards mediocrity. The MLB basically has teams come out at the beginning of the year and they say, if we're not one of the 5 best teams on paper, there's no chance in us trying to win. And that is foolish. It's bad for the sport. It's bad for the fan bases of those teams. And it is bad for those teams, period. Winning, the only way that you learn to win is to try to win. When you are close, whether you're one of the best teams in a really tough division or a tough league, or whether you are just a team like the Mets that kind of hung around because the National League wasn't good enough to get away from them, and then they came jumping back. The circumstances are irrelevant because, again, I will hearken back to the 2 teams that played in the World Series last year. Nobody had them pegged, right? So everybody says, well, the Mets aren't as good as the Diamondbacks or the Rangers. They don't have to be. That was last year. The Mets just need to be the best version of whatever they are right now to justify buying. And the way that I get on board with you with this term soft buy, the example that I will use, and the example that I used on Twitter, was the Scott Kazmir for Victor Zambrano deal. And the reason why I bring that up is because, one, I trust that Stearns wouldn't do a deal like that, because I just trust that he's a smarter baseball executive than the Mets had at the time when they went for an ill-fated move like that. The other part of it is, all of baseball has kind of gotten a little smarter. Like, you don't see a lot of those deals anymore. Yes, you do see the desperation deal from a team that's trying to go all in, right? Look at the Cubs when they traded for Aroldis Chapman and they gave up Gleyber Torres and all these other big-time prospects. Well, it worked. So they're never gonna throw that one back because it worked. Yeah. They won the World Series. Who gives a shit? They could have gave away the next Babe Ruth. It wouldn't have mattered because they broke a World Series drought that was over 100 years long. If you can do that, it doesn't really matter. Now, obviously, if you fall short, then you start to wonder, oh my God, did I do the right thing? Did we do enough? Did we do too much? Whatever the case may be. But teams don't execute that way. So I don't see a situation where the Mets are going to go get Mason Miller and Brett Rooker. I don't see a situation where the Mets are going to get, one of the pitchers from the White Sox and Luis Robert Jr. Like, I don't see them going out and doing that.
Neither way.
But if a deal like that, because those names are being floated about as being available. Cedric Mullins is another one.
Yeah.
If those names are being floated about, you'd be wrong to not at least see what it would take.
Oh, no, of course. Yeah.
Right? Because some of these guys,
everyone talks. Yeah.
It's not Victor Zambrano here. Like, Luis Robert Jr. is one of the best players in baseball. I know he had some injury issues and stuff like that earlier in his career, but the talent is through the roof. And the years of control
and fits the plan. Yes. And
are there. And he fits the plan. So when you look at that situation, I'm just saying, Ibby, I would not be surprised if something sexier than what we expect happens just because of the names being floated out there. And look, I like a lot of these prospects. I don't like some of them, but there's not a prospect on the team, somebody in the minor leagues, there's not a prospect on the team I wouldn't trade for in a deal for Luis Robert Jr. and and Crochet. Like, these are people, like, you'd be insane not to do that deal. So I'm not saying I think it's going to happen. I'm just saying that there are things out there, there are names out there where you have to, like Jeff Cohen is saying, get in the tournament and go for broke. And if you can improve your team that much, it's hard not to. It's hard not to at least listen. That's all I'm saying. So I don't expect it, but I do think that there is a difference with regards to what we're seeing now and what we saw, 2 decades ago from the Mets. Because again, David Stearns is somebody you trust, and he's probably the first GM in a long time that I've actually trusted.
Yeah, and a point that I made last week when we were talking about stuff like this, when Ant was on, we were having a conversation about potential expectations and players of the ilk, because we got asked a question about Mason Miller, and I was basically saying how and this applies for anyone, whether it's Mason Miller, whether it's Garrett Crochet, whether it's Luis Robert. I look at it and I go, as much as I love what the Mets are doing in terms of their farm system, and I like some of the players that they have, but I think that they understand, I know David Stearns understands, that they are still within the, still building it to get higher, how they want to keep attaining better and better and better talent. And they're getting there, and guys are starting to perform more too, but they're still not on the level within where this market is right now to truly be in my opinion, at least, on these types of players. Because if Luis Robert, if Garrett Crochet, if Mason Miller, if these guys are truly on the move, and they, Oakland gets in and wants to get rid of them because they want to cash in, or Chicago wants to cash in. Chicago should cash in, by the way. There are other teams that are also buying that need certain things that have better systems than what the Mets have. And it's not worth dumping out 5, 6, 7 players to get one player than setting yourself back in terms of how you want to build. As much as they make sense, like a Luis Robert makes sense, if the Dodgers want him, the Dodgers can get him. If Baltimore wants Garrett Crochet, they could have him tomorrow if they truly want him. So that's where I think.
Sorry to interrupt. I think that's the biggest stumbling block for the Mets here, because I think that some of those deals might be on the table for the Mets, but I don't know if Stearns is going to be willing to pull the trigger when, again, these teams that are both closer to success, like the Orioles or the Dodgers, and have better farm systems than the Mets, could go out and get that. It's a great point. You're making a great point.
Yeah, and I just think that, that's why I feel that they are working in the, the lesser than, if you want to call it lesser than, market for certain types of players. I think he's really out there. And again, when I say softball, I want to bring up the comment that was made by Carson and put into so eloquently in Carson way. A soft buy means don't trade with your dick in your hand, meaning don't just go to Fangraphs and see that Daniel Vogelback's weighted runs created plus first right-handed pitchers and pull the trigger with a 5-year control reliever. And yes, it's not just going out there and haphazardly buying or that's not the point. So you want to make sure you're being smart. And I think that, the idea of going out there and getting, if they could land, I would say this, if they can go out there and land 2 pen arms, I think that would be huge. Now, will they? I don't know. If they land 1 pen arm and a lefty outfielder that I think that they need, because I don't expect, I don't know what to expect from Marte. I don't know when he's coming back. I know he says he's close. I still don't trust it. And I can't do, the DJ Stewart experiment anymore. I know Brett Beatty's doing well down low, but he's not an outfielder. So I don't know if I know he's doing well in AAA, but I don't know if he's going to get the call back up. So there is a need in terms of left-handed bat, specifically in the outfield. So I would love to go after someone like a Jesse Winker, because I think that's more attainable. I know
Jesse
it's
Winker
Washington.
Makes so much goddamn sense.
And I know it's Washington, and I know Carson has said before that it's tough to deal with Rizzo, and he doesn't want to give anything at all to the Mets. And I get that to an extent, but again, Juan Soto is one thing, because that can kill you for a decade plus. Jesse Winker on a half a season, 1-year deal. If you can get 2, maybe 3 lower end prospects for a guy like that to better fill your system, I don't see why you would be petty like that. But again, you can always applaud someone who holds a grudge to that extent. But somebody like a Winker, somebody like I said, whether it was a Fairbanks from Tampa or a lower end reliever that makes sense for this team, I can see that. I don't expect fireworks. So I'm saying this now because if we're here next week and something comes through and it's of a name that people go, huh? Don't be shocked. Like that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's going to be of the Michael Givens aspect, like what we were the one year, but I'm saying like don't be shocked if it's a lower end name, but someone that can definitely help.
Well, I think you need to show both fans. This is for fans. This is for me and you too. It's advice for all of us. I think you need to show patience and temper expectations, but also the reason why I brought up what I did during this segment and the way that I did is because, again, I don't want to see this as a 2022 trade deadline.
No, I agree. It should be a little bit more aggressive than that. I agree.
Don't give me Darren Ruff and Daniel Vogelback and Tyler Naquin when it's all right in front of you. Now, again, would I trade, Jet Williams and Drew Gilbert for Mason Miller straight up? No, that's stupid. But, would I trade both of those players in a deal that landed me, a star? Yeah, I would consider doing that. Like that's that's been my whole thought process heading into this deadline. And Ant sums this up much better than I could. If the Mets make a big time deal, it's something that will not only impact this playoff run, but future years to come, which is why I bring up the likes of Cedric Mullins and Luis Robert Jr. and Mason Miller and Brett Rooker, guys that are out there. They tried getting cute in 2022 because those were cheap options, but they also didn't want to deal. And I understand why. Right? Yeah. Like you couldn't deal Francisco Alvarez. That's crazy.
Right.
But not every prospect is Francisco Alvarez, right? Not every prospect is a middle of the order 30 to 35 plus home run bat catcher. You don't trade those, even if they're not, because if Alvarez never becomes that, right? Let's say Alvarez never hits 35 home runs in a season, right? Never does that in his Mets career. He's already a much better defensive catcher than anybody would have thought. Yeah. And if his ceiling is 270 and 25, how many other teams are getting that from their catcher? Right. So when you have a guy that projects as high as Alvarez in that position specifically, you can't move that player for a DH. Now, there's just, you get to these outfielders, you get to these middle infielders. I'm not saying that they're nothing. I'm just saying don't be afraid and don't be cheap. And this is a great comment from Mr. Nobody. It's crazy that this will all be over by the next show. Yeah, we're talking about this now, and we're probably going to spend more time talking about this than we even really would have wanted to. Shout out to Carson, by the way. I'm going to join them 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday, which is the trade deadline. So we'll be talking about things leading up to and all that stuff. You could find us there talking about it. And then, Ibby and I will do our best to recap it on our show next week. But, Ibby, there's moves to be made. And look, to Carlos Ortiz's point, Winker would just be a bench piece, a better one than we have. Better one than we have.
And I highlighted that one because I said in our chat, and I know that I think I said it with Ant as well, mentioning how, Jesse Winker is a vibes guy. And I love that I was on the same page with Hector, Blunt Thoughts, talking about, comparing him to Nick Swisher, like that type of player, like a vibes guy, feels good. Doesn't have to be an everyday player. And I don't think that the Mets are out looking to get an everyday bat. And if Jesse Winker plays, 2 times, 3 times a week or whatever it may be, like, I think that that's what they're searching for. I think, again, they're going to play the hot hand. They're going to play matchups. And I think that kind of works in. So I know his defense is abysmal. It's not that great. So
is DJ Stewart, and so is Ben Gamble.
So is DJ Stewart. Yeah. So
you just pick one of those players he's going to replace. And honestly, I don't know if this is going to happen or not, but Jackie Bradley Jr. probably replaces the other one.
Well, Bradley was
going to be on this team at some point.
He's on the minor league deal, so it's not something that has to be done, but it could definitely could.
I just think I think it's gonna happen. I don't think Ben Gamble and now look, I don't know what Jackie Bradley Jr. has never really been a good offensive player. I know he had like a fucking 2,000 OPS playing independent ball with the Long Island Ducks,
right?
But I think you can probably put up like an 800 OPS playing with the Long Island Ducks. So, you take it for what it's worth. I'm just saying, it's less about Jackie Bradley Jr. and more about the other two guys. Like, what does Ben Gamble what is DJ Stewart? Like, eventually, I think he's going to get a chance. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to continue going through some of these comments real quick, and bringing up Carson talking about we're talking about someone that's on the Nats, and then he's saying on Mike Russo saw that the Nats traded Jerry Blevins for Matt Dendecker, and then cut the phone lines ever since. Like, I get it, but my main point is I understand stubbornness. I understand not wanting to deal legitimate talent because you don't want to be the guy who gave someone to a division rival to kill you for years to come. I don't think Jesse Winker is that, but he could go somewhere else because he fits a lot of teams' needs. He could go to Kansas City. He could go back to Seattle. There's a lot of places that Jesse Winker makes sense. So we'll see what that overall price is. And then one more thing from Carson, just saying how, fill in the gaps and margins, which is what they didn't do in 2022. They plugged in a bunch of one-dimensional pieces and then sold us a bit of goods with Tyler Naquin to provide tools. So it's like, there's a way to go about this. I trust because, again, I have all the faith in the world in David Stearns, and I know it's delicate where he is right now because I guarantee you he probably didn't think it was going to be like this. But it's really going to be interesting to see how he handles himself over the next week. And I had said last week, last week I said it was the next 8 to 10 games for a majority of teams where the market was finally going to flesh itself out, and we'll see who truly is available, and that's going to dictate the overall price tag for a lot of these guys.
I totally agree. I'm happy that you brought up that comment from the second one from Carson, because I think it ties into this one from Ant saying the Mets' goal should be at the very least to find ways to get better replacements for DJ Stewart and Adam Ottavino. And I think that's where this all starts to tie in together, right? The Mets do have, we don't know, they're very much, I would say, wild cards, Ibby, all of these guys. But the Mets have a couple pieces potentially coming in the bullpen that should provide them with some relief. No pun intended, right? It's assuming we're going to get Sean Reed-Foley back at some point, and he's been mostly good. I don't know exactly what's going on with Reed Garrett, but he should be back at some point.
He started growing.
Yeah, I know he's very much up and down, but I think it's because the Mets used him too much. I think that's a big part of it. You have Bryce Montez de Oca slowly kind of getting into the conversation. And then you have Fujinama, who is right there in the conversation potentially too. You have 4 guys that you don't know what any of them are realistically. But 4 of those guys could find their way to Queens sooner rather than later. So I think you could replace some of your underwhelming, underperforming bullpen pieces there. But I think you do need, to Ant's point, you need the guy who can close a game in the exact scenario that happened last night. Because Adam Ottavino has fallen out of favor, and rightfully so. I know there are people on Mets Twitter who still like Ottavino for what he brings to a team. He's barely pitchable in the 6th inning at this point. I'm not sure really what you can get out of him. I've not been on the Ottavino train for a long time. You've not, whatever. But you're in a situation where if Nunez has to pitch the 7th or the 8th, and then Maton has to pitch the 7th or the 8th, and Diaz and Buto aren't available, where do you go? Now, look, it worked out. And again, we opened the show, hat tip to the Stones of Mendoza, and more specifically and more accurately, the Stones from Diekman for pulling it off. And I think that's why, I don't know if you remember a couple weeks ago, I said the Mets made more sense for the Mets to DFA Joey Lucchesi, which, by the way, Lucchesi stayed in the organization, so they didn't even lose him. He's just off the 40-man roster. Than it did to get rid of Diekman, I thought, because I just thought over the course of their careers, there is a more likelihood that Diekman will, quote unquote, figure it out and be an asset at the major league level because he's done it before than there is for Lucchesi. Now, again, it's 1 inning. I'm not saying he's figured it all out, and I'm not saying that it goes away with his 5 ERA or whatever. But I just think that last night is an example of, like, I don't know. I would have rather have Jake Diekman pitching in that spot than Joey Lucchesi, because that would have been the choice. Probably. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So, like, when you look at it that way, I understood the move when they made it, and it wound up being the right move, because maybe if they DFA Diekman, they probably lose Diekman. Diekman probably goes somewhere else to a team that is also desperate, just like Michael Tonkin did. And they're like, oh, we can figure it out. We can fix him. We could try this, and I don't think that was going to happen with Lucchesi. And clearly it didn't, because Lucchesi is still in the organization. So I just think they need a guy. Sorry for the digression. I think the Mets need a guy who can, in last night's situation, close. And right now, I'm not sure who that is. Maybe they get Finnegan. Maybe it's Hunter Harvey.
Well, Harvey got dealt, right?
Harvey got dealt. That's right. Thank you.
Harvey got dealt to Kansas City.
Yep.
Yeah. No, but to answer what you're saying, I feel that becomes. I get what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying. I just think that becomes a lot more difficult, because I think only one player on this market, not including Mason Miller, one player on this market really fits that billing. And
Tanner
that
Scott?
would be Tanner Scott. And I don't know, like,
you don't think Finnegan fits that bill?
I think he could, but I think that is more difficult, because I think he has control. I don't quote me. I think he has control. I think it's a tougher trade.
One more year, division. I think.
I think that one's a lot harder. So I've kind of eliminated him from my math when it comes to this. I think Tanner Scott, especially getting a closer look at him, during that Mets series, on what he brings to the table, I think he is that. Now, I don't he's going to be the number one guy, not named Mason Miller, if he is actually available. He's going to be the number one guy for a lot of teams that could use him in a lot of places, and a lot of places where he would actually be the closer, as opposed to here where he would be a spot closer, if you will. So it becomes that much more difficult. And I honestly think Scott makes the most sense. I just don't know.
What about Yates?
I think because he's done it before, and I've mentioned him last week with Ant, I think he makes a lot of sense, and I think he's attainable. So I think he's a little more on the lesser end, but I would still happily take him. But if we're talking about like legit push, I would say you have to go and get Scott and pay that price, but I don't know if they would be willing to do it.
Let me pose, and yes, I was right on this, and thank you, Armand, for saying this. Finnegan has 1 year of control.
Thank you, Armand. Yeah.
But also, I think Finnegan's like 34, so I know he has control, and then that's a issue with trading him in the division, especially for the Nats, trading him to the Mets.
It's also a timing thing, because he's doing well, so you got to pay up. Like, that's the whole thing.
Right. But I just think the year of control is different when you're a little bit older. He's 32 or 34, I don't remember exactly. Let me pose this question to you. It's a question that you asked me, and then I'm going to get into Armand's question before we head into the break. But this is a question I think you asked me 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
What about David Peterson? David Robertson?
Yeah. I think I mentioned, I did bring him up with Ant, and I said that he's a name that makes sense because he's done it here before. I know, leaving somewhere after you're red hot, then he went to Florida, or went to Miami, wasn't that great. He's doing well in Texas now. Like, would he come back? Are you getting the same returns? Older? I think that guys like Robertson, guys like Yates, because they're older. Now, it's also dependent on Texas, because I think they're borderline still. I think they're still deciding what they want to do, because I know they have a lot of guys coming back, and they might say, "Hey, we're going to keep our guys. We're going to try." But if they are available,
you just won a World Series, I would get whatever you can for whatever's not nailed down.
I would agree. I would agree with that. So, and I think that these guys are attainable for what the Mets have. In comparison to the rest of the market, because they are, they're longer in the tooth. I think that they're both in their late 30s, 37, 38 years old. Yeah. So I think that it is possible to get those guys. I would welcome either one of them here. I open arms. I would, because I think that both make sense. So names like that, I think, are what you're looking at. That would be considered on the high end for the Mets. The highest of ends, I think, would be a Tanner Scott. I think he's going to end up going somewhere else. I could see him ending up in Philly. Like, for the longest time, I said that Philly had what it takes to get Mason Miller. I still believe that, but I don't. If Oakland chooses to hold him and not deal him, then I think that Scott going to Philly makes a lot of sense, and I can see them paying the price because they are going to go all in. That's Dave Dombrowski's way. So that kind of makes sense for me, and they do have some pieces that make a lot of sense for Miami. So that's kind of where I am with all of it.
This is a good one from Jeff Cohen. Stern trades for Hader. LOL. Emphasis on for. Thank you, Armand. Always coming through with the fact checking, and I say that in all seriousness, not with sarcasm. I appreciate when you do this.
No, of course,
he is 30. He is 32. Talking about Finnegan, I knew he was 32 or 34. I just had those two numbers floating around in my head. We talked about it the other, I think 2 weeks ago when we were together about this. Ibby, I said we were going to bring up Armand's question next, but we're getting close to when we have to take the break. So I'd rather save that till after the break because I think it's going to open up a different can of worms. So I'm going to ask you one more question about the reliever market.
Yeah.
And the reliever market plus.
Okay.
And I guess, this kind of has to do with what Armand just brought up, which is reports Oakland asking for a king's ransom for Miller.
As they should. He has 5 years left.
Right. Is there a world, you're David Stearns, is there a package that you would do from the Mets prospects that would get you Mason Miller and Rooker that you would be okay with doing? That's realistic. And I don't even necessarily listen. The Mets could use Rooker. I don't know that they need Rooker. I just think that that's the kind of deal. I think the Mets would be more comfortable giving away more, getting more, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Giving away a little bit more to get a little bit more. Is there a deal that you would do if you were in control? I know I'm putting you on the spot. We did not talk about this at all.
No, I mean, it's hard for me to answer mainly because I always think from the big picture perspective of both sides, and knowing what Miller can get alone and knowing what Rooker can get alone. I don't think Oakland would do that with the Mets, and it would be even more difficult because I think it would literally cost the Mets probably not taking from their major league roster, and meaning you would have to give a legitimate player at that point. I don't think that they have the horses. But if I'm pulling something out of midair, I would say
just for fun.
I would say like it would probably take all right, I'll put it this way. It would probably cost you, if Scott didn't get hurt, it's one of Scott or Sproat it would take. It would probably take, they might even ask for Tidwell. They're definitely, again, medicals would matter with Mauricio. Jet's probably in there too. And maybe they like some of the guys in the lower end where it's like a Baez, something like that. Like it would take a lot. And I even at that point, I don't even know if it's enough to do it. I don't. So no matter what, it's hard for me because of how my brain operates. And I'm always thinking like, there's no shot that they would do this. And I think I have a grasp of the Mets farm in a sense in comparison to the rest of others that have a readily available talent. I don't think that Oakland would do it. I don't.
What about this one? Okay, this one coming from Jose, who I don't know if this is might be a first-time commenter. If you are, welcome.
I think it is. Welcome, Jose.
If you're not, welcome back, and I apologize. We see a lot of familiar faces or familiar handles, as it were. So welcome if you are here for the first time. This says trade proposal for Crochet and Robert, Beatty, Scott, Parada, Acuna, Vasil, Ramirez. I mean, when you look at that, because here's when you look at that list, Corey saying, Jose, that would set our minors back too many years. And then Jose saying, not really. And then Corey saying, you are kidding yourself. When I look at this deal for those two players, I think I would do that.
Of course you would do that because it's less than that.
I don't, but here's the thing. I don't love, everybody knows, I don't love Brett Beatty. I like Acuna. I don't love Acuna. I have no idea what Parada is, but I'm not super.
He's got an 860 OPS in July. I can tell you that.
I just don't know.
He's hot right now.
He's not somebody that I am like, oh my God. I kind of like him. Maybe he's like in between Beatty and Acuna for me. So I would make that deal if that was on the table. I don't think that that's terrible because you're still holding on to Clifford, who I think is a better prospect than most of the people here. You know how I feel about Ronnie Mauricio. You know how I feel about Drew Gilbert. You still have Jet Williams in the fold. You're still hanging on to Sproat. Like, to me, like, the hardest guy to let go in this entire group is Scott. And I know I'm saying, like, I know you're going to, that's why I would do it, because it's a lesser deal. Right. But I tend to agree with, I don't think this deal gets it done, but I tend to agree with Jose here rather than Corey. I don't think that this sets the minors back too far when you're talking about two players that you would be getting from a hypothetical like this.
For me, I always think that when it comes to having a good minor system, it's all about building depth so you can continuously keep that wheel turning. That's what makes the Dodgers so successful. You can look at all the deals that the Dodgers have made and look at the guys that have actually come up. Some of them pan out, a majority of them don't, but it's all about having that turning wheel to keep things going so you always have the next guy up. So like, I look at that and I go, there's no, like, you can say, yeah, do it, but it would kill the depth, but you don't care because the players that you're giving up are lesser than, and you're keeping your better ones. When in reality, it would be like, oh, you want Crochet and Robert? Well, we'll start off by saying we want Scott, we want potentially Sproat, we also want Clifford and Gilbert, and like, because that where their system is it pales in comparison to the likes of Baltimore. Or even like the Dodgers are lesser than what they used to be at the moment, at least, but they still have more to offer than the Mets do because they could say, hey, we'll take both of them and we'll give you these 4 prospects. Whereas we just laid out a deal that's offering like 5, 6, 7 players. And I'm just like, they could say like, yeah, it's nice, but I can do better over here. Like, that's how I'm looking.
Yeah, no, I know. And look, we're playing the hypothetical game, and I appreciate Jose for bringing it up. And, Corey's saying exactly what you said. I'm saying it from a volume perspective. Yeah, he's saying quantity over quality necessarily. But I'm here with Killa on this one. Trade all the prospects for proven major league talent. These guys don't become available every year. Yes, that's where I kind of reside. You know that. You know I'm a little less. And I understand how. I understand the thought process of what building a major league team takes, right? But if we're having the conversation, I think Ibby is a little bit more like conservative in that sense with prospects than I am, which is funny because I'm not really much of a gambler. And I think if I was being told, like if it was actually my job to do it, I probably would be a little bit more conservative. I don't know if I would be.
I think really when it comes down to it, for me at least, it's about timing. That's really what it comes down to. You can strike. You can. I'm not saying never deal guys. You can deal guys. I just think it always comes down to the timing aspect. Like I said to you before, if you have a 35, 36, 37-year-old reliever doing well, cash in, sell him, and get something to better the overall depth of your minor league system. It might not be a super sub, but you're just bettering your depth to give yourself a little bit more. But I think it really comes down to if where your team is and something becomes available, I'm about dealing something because if I can get that player, it helps push me over the top, then please do so. I don't know if the Mets are at that point yet in terms of the overall major league team as well as where the farm system is at the moment. I don't think they're ready to make that huge deal because I don't think they can make that huge deal. We've got about 40-ish minutes to play with, 45 minutes before the show needs to end and before the Mets start their game against the Yankees. So we'll head into the break here in a second. I just want to ask you one question, Ibby. Sure. Is there one player in our prospect pool that you would be the most okay with trading in any deal, any hypothetical deal to make this team better? And is there one player in our prospect pool that you are absolutely not trading? I know if Carson's here, he's going to. There could be more. There could be more than one of either, but just give me your top one in either case. Not trading, absolutely not, and would be most comfortable trading. And people in the chat too, if you follow the Mets prospects and you want to throw your hat in the ring on this, yes, go ahead. One player you absolutely would be okay with trading. One player you absolutely would not be okay with trading. As I stall to give Ibby a chance to think about it. I would say off the top of my head real quick, I know Carson, if he's still here, he's going to assume that I'm going to say Jet Williams because I like Jet Williams. I think he can be a good ball player. I'm not going to say him when it comes to the untouchable. Like, I'm under no circumstances right now am I trading. I'm not trading Brandon Sproat. I like everything that I see so far, and I think it makes a lot of sense for this team. And developing your pitching and not paying out big money for pitching is the proper and smart way to go. So I am not trading Brandon Sproat. If you said to me that, I'll give you an example, and this will include the guys that I would deal away from this prospect list. If you were able, and I don't even know if it would be enough, but it depends on the Tanner Scott market. But if the Mets had called the Marlins and said, hey, we're interested in Tanner Scott, where can we start off with these talks? If they said, hey, you got to pay me Brett Beatty, Luis Angel Acuna, and Kevin Parada, I would think about doing that deal. I would. Like something like that. And I know Parada's fallen out of favor with a lot of people, and Acuna is whatever, but and I'll talk about Acuna in a minute because he hasn't been doing so hot in AAA. But I think that something like that I would be okay with doing. If
I would fly to New York and drive all of them to Miami myself.
Right. But again, I don't know. Like, it's so hard with Miami because they make deals that make a lot of people go, what? Like, so it's tough to really pinpoint.
Yeah, I mean, they also got rid of Kim Ng after,
it's very hard to really pinpoint their thought process. But for me, guys I don't want to see go like at all. I still like Jet. I don't want to see him go anywhere. And his value's down because he's hurt. But it's really Sproat, it's Clifford, and also I want to continue to see what Drew Gilbert has. I think Drew Gilbert can be something. So like those guys I don't want to see go. I'm willing to listen on other ones though. Definitely.
Yeah, I'll answer just in fairness. A lot of stuff in the comments. People are agreeing with you. On Sproat, and I'm going to agree with you too on Sproat. I think you made all the points just about developing your own pitchers so that you don't have to buy pitchers. Like, you can't afford to buy 3 pitchers every offseason. You can't afford, like, it's just not a smart way.
No,
and again, Steve Cohen can afford to buy whatever he wants, and yes, he can, and yes, he should, and da-da-da-da. I'm not shilling for billionaires here. He should do it, and he has done it. But it's not smart baseball to build out a team like that, trying to buy starting pitching. So even if Sproat only becomes a middle of the rotation guy, a back end guy, it is all valuable. It is all helpful. And obviously right now we hope his ceiling is higher. So he's a guy that I would not want to trade. The next not want to trade guy for me is probably Drew Gilbert. Maybe him and Clifford honestly are kind of tied. I love Clifford's power potential. And I think Gilbert has a real chance to be, an outfielder on this team wherever he plays, one of the 3 spots somewhere in the not so distant future, sometime next year, maybe. So apart from that, look, I would trade Brett Beatty for anything in any deal. I don't think Brett Beatty has a future on this team, and I don't love him as a prospect. So that's obvious. Acuna is another one that I would include in a deal. I like what I've seen from Scott, and I know the injury makes things a little iffy. Yeah. But I would think about it in a certain, like, listen, if somebody's like, hey, I don't care about the issue with his UCL. It doesn't bother me. I'm not worried about it. I think he's going to be fine. Would we take him in a deal for ABC or like, yeah, okay, fine. Like I wouldn't be like, oh my God, Scott's untouchable. So, look, there are definitely some guys here that can definitely fetch us something. We must keep Nate Lavender for the vibes. Of course.
You just got struck out by Nate Lavender.
Blessings on blessings on blessings for Nate Lavender. All right, Ibby, let's head into the break. We have a lot of stuff that we still want to get to, and everybody who's watching live, and there are a lot of you Don't go anywhere. This is just a quick 30-second ad spot that we need for the audio version of this show. So it's John Saponaro, it's Matt Ibanez, it's Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube only, I think, kind of, sort of today, but we'll be back on Twitter or X hopefully by next week. We'll figure out what the hell's going on with that. All courtesy of the Brella Sports Network. We'll see you in 30. Yo, just like that, we are back with Til Mets Do Us Part. We are live in some of the usual places, not live in others, but it's all good. We appreciate everybody who is watching live. And if you are watching live, go ahead and hit a thumbs up on the video, especially on YouTube. And while you're there, I think we've got some new folks or some newer folks. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel, because if you do that, you turn your notifications on, you will never, ever, ever miss an opportunity to know when we are going live, so you can become a full-fledged participant in the show. And of course, we understand that people can't always watch live. And if you miss anything, you leave early. Like I think Chris Ferraro did. He jumped in, said hello, and was like, I got to get back to work. I'll see you guys later. You can always catch us on replay, because the show lives on YouTube forever and ever and ever. So again, if you're subscribed, you know exactly where to go to find us. And if you can't do any of that, you can listen to this show. It drops about an hour or two after we're done with the live recording. You can get it on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, all of those places and more as an audio podcast. So you can listen on your drive to work, while you're at the gym, wherever you may be. You can take us with you and listen to us. You just don't get to see our smiling faces. Ibby, before we get back into the conversation, there's a lot to do. Not that much time to do it before the Mets and the Yankees kick off what is the final game of their series this year. Let's talk about independent safes.
Of course, independent safes is always protecting homes and businesses with secure residential and commercial safes, fireproof peace of mind in every corner. Visit independentsafes.com today for security that stands strong. And look, we're going to talk about a guy that many of you wanted to put in an independent safe for the longest time, John included, myself included, majority of this chat included, majority of X, Twitter, majority of Mets fans all around the world wanted to put one Jeff McNeil inside of an independent safe, throw away the key, throw it into the river, and let it rot. That's what they wanted, but we're going to talk about Jeff McNeil in a moment, and he's our man on fire, which we'll talk about in a second, like I just said. But independentsafes.com, check them out. $99, free shipping. It's all $99. So if you need a safe, it's going to cost you a little bit. But
I love that.
It is free shipping, and tell them that Til Mets sent you.
Absolutely. We can't continue the conversation without talking about our friends over at MANSCAPED. The logo is in the lower, I guess, right-hand corner of the screen for those of you who are watching. We've been partnered with MANSCAPED for the last couple months. It has been absolutely fantastic, and we want to share it with you. And so you will get 20% off site-wide, everything on the site, and free shipping if you use the promo code TMDUP. That is Til Mets Do Us Part over at manscaped.com. We open the show talking about the stones on Jake Diekman and the stones on Carlos Mendoza. Well, you know what? Jake Diekman, Carlos Mendoza, if you are listening to this, which I hope they are, but they're probably not, you too can make sure that those stones are perfectly manscaped with the code TMDUP at manscaped.com. Ibby, you teased Jeff McNeil.
I did.
So let's talk about Jeff McNeil before we talk about the fallout of Scott getting hurt, the prospect of Senga coming back, what that does for the rotation, what that does for acquisitions. There's a comment I have starred from Armand that I want to bring that up. And there's also just some trade deadline ramifications now, like you kind of alluded to in the first half, things I posted on Twitter yesterday with regards to where the rotation is going to go. But McNeil has been unlike any Jeff McNeil we've ever seen before, save for maybe the juice ball Jeff McNeil.
Jeff McNeil has been the one player when this team was red hot, Grimace era Mets, whatever you want to call them, the month of June. Like, he was the square peg in the round hole. It just wasn't there. It wasn't working. It felt as though he didn't want to be there. Even when he was doing stuff with the OMG sign, I felt like very haphazardly, like, yeah, whatever. Like, it wasn't there. And he has been a man on fire. When this offense has kind of sputtered in spots outside of Lindor. Look, Brandon Nimmo was scorching hot for the longest time. Now he's a little bit of a funk. He's like 2 for his last 22 or something. Like, it hasn't been there. I'm not worried about it. He'll get back to it. But Jeff McNeil has stepped up big time, and I had to make a man on fire for this one. And his last 7 games, 346, 379, 885 slash. He was 9 for his last 26. 2 doubles, 4 homers, 11 RBIs, 6 runs, 2 walks, and a stolen bag. He has been providing for this team on the back end when it comes to his placement in the lineup, which we've been saying, look, if he can just help and continue that quarter in the merry-go-round to keep things going, like, that's what we want for Jeff McNeil. Well, now he's pulling the ball. He's swinging harder. He's like, hey, look, I'm instead of trying to place the ball, I'm going to swing as hard as I fucking can, and I'm going to try to hit home runs. And
shocking that works.
What? He had 5 home runs the first 92 games or something of the season, and over the last 7, he has 4. A different look and approach. I know Carson will appreciate it, even though he still hates him, but it's good to see Jeff McNeil doing these types of things. And I'm going to use this as also a carrying point to what I normally do at the end of the show, which is hit on, like, on the farm. We mentioned Luis Angel Acuna before. And I know that Brad was in the chat earlier, and he was saying how doesn't matter, McNeil is hot, trade him, get rid of him. I understand the sentiment, because we've all been saying, like, hey, Jeff, get hot so we can deal you. But let's understand one thing. When it comes to, and Jose there as well saying it, look, if something presents itself, I'm not saying don't do it. Like, please go ahead, do it. But we also have to understand a lot of people would come back, and myself included, saying how if you do that, then you can call up Acuna, you can get some playing time. Understand this. The month of July hasn't been kind to Luis Angel Acuna at AAA. I want to say his OPS is in the mid-5s, not the greatest of things. And he has shown to this point, it hasn't been like a model of consistency. Like, he'll be hot for 20 games and then it goes ice cold, and it's just like there's no power, it's a speed, it's better defense. So before they ship Jeff out and you want this team to compete, they might choose to ride the hot hand here outside of the idea of Jeff McNeil being able to give you a reliever that you cherish. I don't know if that's what's going to happen here. So I think Jeff is going to be here. And while you're here, Jeff, keep swinging the bat hard, man. You're providing much better results and it's helping the team win ball games.
I'll say all that I have to say about Jeff McNeil. I'll try to be as brief as I can. If you follow me on Twitter, if you watch this show, you know that I am not a big fan of what Jeff McNeil has become. I have long said that Jeff McNeil needs to hit a minimum of 300. Otherwise, he is a useless offensive player. Jeff McNeil is now in a situation where prior to this hot streak, it would be 3 out of 4 bad years with a batting title sprinkled in there in the middle. Jeff McNeil is a very one-dimensional offensive player. If he's not hitting for a high average, everything else suffers because he makes a lot of weak contact. He makes a lot of early contact. He makes a lot of unfortunate contact, double plays, things of that nature. Doesn't really drive the ball. So, he's not really a sack fly guy. If he's hitting 310, if he's hitting 320, yeah, his on-base percentage is going to be high. He's going to knock in runs because he's going to get a lot of hits. Everything is going to be hunky-dory. But if he is not doing that, he is not a great player to have on your team, especially when I used to think that he was an above-average player defensively at every position that he plays. He has sort of come back to the pack a little bit. He's not bad. I just don't think he's as good as he once was. Now, he's made a couple of great plays at second base, but I think it's also because maybe I think second base is now kind of the position for Jeff McNeil. I think it's the position he's become the best at, and I think it's, while he can play in the outfield, I don't really know that that's a spot you want to put him in. Plus, left field, right field, more power positions, blah, 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 blah. I thought it was ridiculous. Earlier in the season, the Mets were on ESPN. Now, I don't know if this is true, but Eduardo Perez said that Jeff McNeil told him he was trying all offseason to work on not pulling the ball. that is a dumb approach. They said it on the Mets broadcast a couple days ago that he there's been the joke that oh, well, you could just hit the ball hard, that he was trying too hard to place the ball. I also think that that's dumb. I'm not as far on the bandwagon as Carson is with regards to pulling the ball and lifting the ball, because I don't necessarily think that every player needs to do that to be successful. But I do think that most players are better if they do that. Not everybody is JD Martinez. Not everybody is Juan Soto. Not everybody is prime David Wright or Mike Piazza, who have a tremendous amount of power the other way. Jeff McNeil slapping the ball towards the shortstop is not the best version of Jeff McNeil, especially when, and I tweeted this, he is a great bat-to-ball player. So I think the best way for McNeil to maximize his ability is to try to take what the teams are giving him. If they're pitching him inside and it's early in the count, he should be looking to swing hard and pull hard and drive the ball, because he's a guy who can make contact, easy contact, soft contact with 2 strikes. My biggest gripe with McNeil can be summed up like this. Every at-bat, Ibby, no matter the situation, it just felt like he was swinging with a 2-strike approach. And situational hitting that everybody touts that McNeil is so good at takes into account the entire situation. And with runners on second and third and nobody out, hitting a first pitch soft line drive at 62 miles an hour to the shortstop is not good situational hitting. I'd rather have him pull a ball down the line that goes just foul and then readjust his approach after that. So I say all that to say, I am not the biggest Jeff McNeil fan. He has fallen very quickly out of favor for me over the last 3 years or so. But what he's doing now is very important. And I think he is an important part of this team, the way that they're constituted, because I don't think he is tradable right now. Because I don't think that his contract is something that people are going to want to take on, even though it is quote-unquote team-friendly. It is long, and people aren't sure of what kind of Jeff McNeil you're going to get. I also think, to your point, Jet Williams, hurt. Ronnie Mauricio, hurt. Luis Angel Acuna, not performing. If you trade Jeff McNeil, you really have to hope, and I know he's been great, that Jose Iglesias is going to play every day and hit, I know he's not going to hit 400 or even 350 or even 300, but he's got to then produce and really produce like a starting player. Right now, this platoon has worked. And if you put him out there every single day, he might get overexposed. Yeah. So I think that he needs to be on this team at least for the rest of the year. So when I see this from Jose, who says we need to include him in a deal at the deadline, I just don't think that it's realistic. Do I think that McNeil being better is good for the Mets? I do. I think it's good for the Mets short term because I think he's going to be on their team for the rest of the season. And then I think in the offseason, you could ride that hot hand and you can, like Jose followed up with, eat some of his contract and then deal him when you have a healthy Ronnie Mauricio, a healthy Jet Williams, who knows, maybe even a healthy Acuna if you don't trade any of these people, and then you can reassess where you go at second base. But right now, the Mets need this version of Jeff McNeil to be here. They need Jeff McNeil to find his Daniel Murphy and hit the ball and pull the ball. I'm not saying go out there and look to hit home runs. He just has to look to drive the baseball, which is something he has not done for the better half of 3 seasons. And if this is what he is now, I'll be the first person to say great, but I'm not going to sit here and say I was wrong, because this is exactly what he wasn't doing, and that's according to 2 broadcasts now. Because Gary Cohen, Ron Darling, and Keith Hernandez talked about him trying to not hit the ball hard or whatever, and Eduardo Perez talked about him deliberately trying to not pull the ball. And those are not how modern baseball players succeed. He's not Juan Soto. He's not JD Martinez. He's not prime David Wright. He's not Aaron Judge. He should be trying to maximize what he does. His bat-to-ball skills are great. Put the bat on the ball and try to pull the ball. Look at the dividends it's paying.
Yeah, and I think that it really comes down to like people want this team to buy and compete and keep pushing forward. I don't think it makes sense at this moment to deal away McNeil, mainly because the returns are not there from the guys that you thought could fill the spot, namely being Luis Angel Acuna, because it's just not there. And I agree with you. You don't want to overexpose Jose Iglesias. I know Jose Iglesias is a veteran. I know he's played the game at an extended period within a given season.
And
but
he hit like 290 for the Rockies 2 years ago. Like he can hit.
The guy can hit, but I don't think playing him every day is going to bring the returns that a lot of people think it will. I love seeing him in the lineup, especially when he's hot. And look, I can't take anything away from the guy. He's got a 380 or 387 average right now. Like, I'm not taking that away from him. But I do think that you would see that. I don't want to say torpedo, but it would start moving down if he was playing every day, because you know that if they were to deal McNeil and then call up Acuna, like Acuna's not going to play every day. So he'd be getting spot starts here and there. So you'd be seeing more of Iglesias. I just don't think it makes sense at the moment because there's no one to truly fill that role. So I think you're going to see Jeff McNeil here. It helps that he's helping us win ball games right now. And it's something that you would probably revisit in the offseason.
I completely agree on that. And I just think for as bad as he's been, and for as much shit as I've given him, and damn near nobody's given him more shit than I have, you just have to look at what you're seeing and understand the full landscape of things. And like you said, I don't think there's a tremendous trade market for Jeff McNeil. And I don't think that the Mets really can afford to trade Jeff McNeil, because realistically, he's doing now what we've all wanted him to do this whole time, which is be a productive member of this offense. The team is better. This team is better if Jeff McNeil, and I said this even going back to the offseason. If you remember, I was like, hey, if Jeff McNeil shows you he can be the Jeff McNeil of old, he can start to work his way back into the top half, the first spot, the second spot in the lineup. Obviously, that ship has sailed now with the Mets having Lindor and Nimmo and JD Martinez and Pete Alonso. That's a very good first four. McNeil's not going to crack that. But what I will go back to on that is this team is better if Jeff McNeil doesn't have to bat ninth because he's terrible. Like, this team is better with McNeil hitting, I know I think he hit sixth yesterday, but if he's somewhere 6, 7, or 8, that means that this team is functioning better offensively than they were in the past, because this team is better with a guy like Harrison Bader hitting ninth. Like, it means the lineup is longer. You were putting guys up higher because Jeff McNeil was borderline unplayable.
Right.
That's not great. If you're putting Harrison Bader ninth by choice because you're like, oh, this is how the lineup makes sense to me, we're all good. If you're putting McNeil ninth, it's because, like, well, Iglesias isn't playing today. McNeil's playing. McNeil's batting 215. I guess he has to hit ninth. It just is what it is. So, if that's the way you're constituting a lineup, that's not good. So I just think they're in a better spot right now. I think there's another new commenter, Pantrice. Am I saying that right? Pantrice. Wouldn't mind keeping Jeff around 9 either to turn the lineup over. I don't disagree with that, despite everything I just said. I just don't want it to be a necessity, and that's what I'm saying. It was necessity before. He was so bad that you were like, if we're gonna play him, he has to bat ninth. It's where the worst player bats, right? Like, it's just we have no choice. So I like what they're doing right now. Ibby, this is a good one from Darren. The squirrel and the polar bear are going to be involved in tonight's scoring. Do you want to talk about Pete Alonso, or do you want to not talk about Pete Alonso? Pete Alonso's not getting traded, okay?
Pete Alonso is not getting traded. We know that.
They basically said as much. So it's not like this is going to be our last chance to talk about Pete Alonso. So I'm just going to ask you, and I will honor whichever way you go. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about Pete Alonso, or do you want to talk about the rotation?
If I say one thing about Pete Alonso, but I really want to move to the rotation, can we keep it short on Pete Alonso, or do you think it's gonna snowball? So I think you. I want to talk about the rotation.
Okay,
I
would rather talk about the rotation too, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So say what you're going to say about Pete Alonso. My feelings on Alonso, well documented. He's not had a Pete Alonso year. I'll just say that.
He is not.
People are yelling at me like, "Oh, how could you defend him?" I'm like, "Well, prior to this season, 45 and 115 is very easy to defend. I don't know what you want me to say. This year, he needs to be better. So that's all I'll say. What were you going to say?
I would say that, based off the conversation I had with Ant last week too, definitely pressing. I think the idea of the contract is an issue. And to credit to Ant, it feels as though Pete is very buttoned up, and it doesn't come across as the Pete that we've all grown to love, just being a big doof. And again, I think that with how the team is constituted, I don't think it allows him to be that. I think he thinks he needs to be something more. And I think he would thrive better if he was just, doofy Pete, just going out there hitting bombs because homers are sick. I don't see that guy. And I think that's a problem. I think that's why the offense isn't there. It just doesn't feel like I know the home run derby doesn't mean anything really, but even watching him in that, I felt like he was very disinterested, based off of the swings that he was having. That could have just been bad pitchers. And, some days you just don't have it, but it's kind of felt like that for a majority of the season. And the numbers dictate that. So not getting traded definitely needs to provide more if this team truly wants to compete. And I think that to this point, we still haven't seen Pete really go on a tear, like a Pete tear like that we know. I think this team needs that in order to get where they want to get. And, with the Braves within reach now, go out there and win a ball game tonight, be a part of that, Pete. And then, going into facing Atlanta, big set there. They're down. They're wounded. Late July, they're wounded. Not normal. Can him being a part of that would move mountains. It really would.
Yeah.
Will it happen? I don't know, but I just think that I'll say it's been a tough watch. I know he had a couple hits last night. Hopefully it's a start of something. But
his overall numbers are not horrible.
They're not horrible, but it's very weird how he's
not been in the clutch and he hasn't been hitting enough home runs.
And that's weird. We love Francisco Lindor, but seeing Francisco Lindor as the team leader in home runs with Pete Alonso on the team is weird. It is.
It's very weird. I don't want to jump into a whole thing about Alonso. I told you I wouldn't. But I will say, can I just say one thing about it? We'll talk about it more next week.
Yeah.
I agree with you about the mentality. I think that every person who is presented with the walk year performs differently. And I think that some people are Max Scherzer, some people are Juan Soto, some people are Aaron Judge, and some people do not do that. Some people do not perform when they are faced with uncertainty. And that's just how it goes.
It's a lot of pressure.
I think Pete is similar to, I'll make a Javi Baez comparison.
Okay.
I've always told you that I think Javi Baez is better just being Baez. He was great on the Cubs because he was just one of the guys on that team. Right. They also had Rizzo, and they also had Bryant, and they also had that guy and this guy. When he came here, they had Lindor, and they had Nimmo, and they had Alonso, and Baez could just be Baez. Baez goes to Detroit. You want to talk about disinterested? Yeah. I don't think Baez forgot how to play baseball. He's one of the most physically gifted baseball players I've ever watched with my own eyes. He is so athletic, and he is so smart. His baseball IQ is so high. Mm-hmm. Now, listen, is it an indictment on Baez that he goes there, he signs a big deal, and he's like, fuck it, who cares what happens? Absolutely. That's an indictment on him in a different way.
Yes.
But he didn't go there and forget how to hit. He didn't go there and forget how to play baseball. I think Pete is the kind of player that just needs to be Pete. And I think the contract talk and the not having a contract is affecting him. Because, Ibby, he is in the perfect position to just be Pete. Because if the Mets had a captain, who's the captain on this team? It's probably Lindor. If it's not Lindor, it's Nimmo. So Pete is at least third in that ranking. If the Mets were looking for a rah-rah leader, it's Alvarez. It's not Pete. If the Mets were looking for a steady, stoic leader, it's JD Martinez. It's not Pete. And I'm not saying that as a slight to Pete. I'm saying that Pete should be in the middle of all these people, just doing what Pete Alonso does. Just hitting fucking bombs. That's all he should be worried about. He shouldn't be worried about his batting average. He shouldn't be worried about what people tweet about his batting average. Pete Alonso was a more productive player last year, hitting 220 with 40-something home runs and 120 RBI than he is now with less than 20 home runs. I think he's hitting just under 250. He's a more productive player that way. Yeah, Doug is right. Pete put pressure on himself. Stephanie is right. Pete is pressing too hard in a contract year. I think all of that is true. And so we'll talk more about Pete next week because he's not going anywhere. Talk more about Pete, whether or not he should be brought back in the coming weeks and at the end of the season and all that stuff. We have about 10 minutes. Maybe we could stretch it to 15. Let's talk about this rotation because it's very important that we talk about it.
Yes.
Scott is out.
Yes.
There are reports that he is not out for the year. It is rest and rehab, and they hope to have him pitching again before the season is over. But that is a long-term thing. Right now, he is gone. The positive is Senga is back on Friday. Kodai Senga will make his long-awaited season debut. The problem is that they were going to go to a six-man rotation, so this one-for-one swap of Scott for Senga doesn't work. And I think the six-man worked great while Senga got his feet under him, while Senga pitched in a more comfortable situation, which is more akin to what he pitched in Japan with those more days off. And I think it was good for Scott, who was going to be on an innings limit anyway. Right now, Ibby, you have Senga, Severino, Quintana, Minaya, and Peterson. That's who's in your rotation. Your other options are Tyler McGill, Joey Lucchesi, Jose Butto, or Adrian Hauser. None of those are particularly good. Now, Armand threw this up earlier. Andy Martino was reporting that Tyler McGill will get the start on Saturday against the Braves due to Scott being on the IL. Now, I think if you are going to go to a six-man, the way that the bullpen currently is set up, Hauser and Butto need to be in that bullpen.
Correct.
I know Hauser's taken a step back, but he's been much better in the bullpen than he was as a starter.
Yes.
And Butto has become a legitimate weapon in the bullpen. He's like Seth Lugo 2.0. So until you start getting relief pitchers, if they do at the deadline, or some of the guys in-house like Montez Dioca are ready, Sean Reed Foley are ready, you can't pull those guys out. Lucchesi to me is whatever. So I think while I'm not enthused about McGill, I think of those four options, he's the best of the four. But this I will finally pay off my comment from earlier about pulling up Armand's other question. Should the Mets look into James Paxton with the result of the Scott injury? I don't know what Paxton is, but I would rather see Paxton than Tyler McGill. Your thoughts?
I would agree on that. I would rather Paxton than Tyler McGill. Paxton's numbers are iffy. I know he was 8-2, and obviously that, from the boomer perspective of a baseball fan, you would think, oh my God, how could somebody get released at 8-2? That's bullshit. Analytical baseball is stupid. But the numbers weren't that great. They have some guys coming back. Kershaw's coming back. Glasnow's coming back. So they opted to DFA the guy. I agree. I would rather have him than McGill. Will they attack it? We'll see. But I definitely think that he's a better option in comparison to McGill. But this is why I've been saying also, I wouldn't be shocked if this team was involved in the starting pitching market. There are some guys on the lower end that could make sense here. So when I hear the name,
you already mentioned Fetty.
Yeah, I think Fetty makes a lot of sense. He makes a lot of sense for other teams as well. But, the Mets were the one of two teams with Chicago that were in on him from the offseason. So I could see a revisitation there. I know CP talked about it on his show last night, and I'll reiterate it, because it's a guy that I think could make sense too. Cal Quantrill. Rockies are out of it, going after a guy like that. He's having a decent year. Not blow away stuff, not a strikeout guy, more pitch to contact. But he's a guy that I could see, again, plugging in, because I as much as I want this team to attack the bullpen as others do, I don't want to see Jose Butto removed from the bullpen, because I think the fact that he can go potentially 2 innings in a given time is big. Yeah, you lose him for the next day, but it's kind of, he kind of works as what you
need.
In. Right. It kind of works on what you need in that given moment. I like having that in the pen, and I think he's really adapted to that. And Mendoza brought it up too, saying how, if we were to take Buto out of the pen, then it's going to be about, getting him stretched out again and kind of messing with him in that sense. And I don't think pitchers really like that back and forth nature. We've seen it a lot when it comes to the Mets over the years, whether Seth Lugo was talking about it, you want to go back in time and talk about Aaron Heilman, you want to talk about from the Yankee perspective in New York with Jabba Chamberlain, like guys don't
Jabba rules! Jabba rules!
We don't want to talk about that stuff.
I don't know why I yelled. I don't know why I screamed that. I don't know why I've never been passionate about anything that relates to Jabba Chamberlain in my life.
You want to channel your inner Francesa. It's okay. Okay. But seeing how, like, when you say all the names that are available when you're trying to make this 6-man work and you want to continue to have depth, I wouldn't be shocked to see them attack a starting pitcher if the price is right. And I think, players like Fetty and Quantrill could make sense. Of course, assuming that they don't land something bigger and better for the pen. But, all in all, I would like to see them go after one of those guys because I think they make sense for where this team is and they can help them moving forward.
I think in a weird way, the Mets are in a kind of good position because of this, Ibby. Because I think Armand sums it up here. If they trade for a starter, Buto, I'll just kind of add my editorial to this comment. If they trade for a starter, Buto stays in the bullpen, where he's been a weapon. You don't have to worry about stretching him back out. Even if his future is as a starter next year, you worry about that next year. It's a different situation. McGill can go to the bullpen, and you can use other players internally. Because I do think McGill, I think his stuff potentially, I mean, we've talked about it with other people. John Manconi has said it, would he be an asset, an absolute weapon where you said, hey, man, you have 2 pitches, air out your fastball, rely on your secondary pitch. You pitch 1 inning. You're a relief pitcher now. So one thing they really haven't tried with McGill, and I think he has the stuff to do that. So I think the way the Mets are in a positive situation is that they need pitching.
Yes.
But they have a lot of the most important parts kind of sewn up, right? We hope that Senga comes back and is the ace. Severino's been great. Quintana's been mostly steady, especially when Alvarez catches him, and since Alvarez has been back. Manaya's been a little up and down, but Manaya's been kind of what you would expect. I think Peterson,
and given innings.
And I think Peterson, who I don't really love, but I think he's been better than
a lot better
would expect. And I'll even admit that.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're like, oh my God, we're desperate. We need an ace. We need an ace right now. Now the Mets have like a killer ace like they did when they had DeGrom. No, they don't. I don't even think Senga is that.
No, he's not.
They don't need a top end starting pitcher. They need a pitcher. Now, I understand that Diaz has not been Diaz, but he is still Edwin Diaz, and their potential for him to be there is there. Nunez has been really good. Buto has been a weapon. Maybe some of these other guys like Reed Garrett and Sean Reed Foley come back, and they're weapons. So the Mets don't necessarily need that relief ace either. The Mets just need some pitchers. So I think the fact that they could get a starter and put a starter in the bullpen like McGill works out for them. The fact that they could get a reliever or 2 and then pull a pitcher from the bullpen and put them in the rotation like Jose Buto, I think that works out for them. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that they're pigeonholed where they have to make one move. And man, they got to make that one move. And if they don't, they're screwed. They have flexibility with the fact that some of their pitchers can be starters or relievers. And I think that's a pretty good place to be in terms of negotiating with other teams if you're trying to make a deal. I'll just bring up these 2. One from Ricardo, who says, I'm done with McGill. I understand a lot of people are. I'm kind of done with McGill as a starter, but for everything that I just said, he just makes the most sense in the short term.
For right now, yes.
For right now. I also think, and Ibby and I were in lockstep on this, the start of the season, everything McGill did in the offseason and what he did in spring training, we thought he deserved one more shot to be in the rotation. They gave him that shot. He got hurt early. He came back. He was pretty good. And then he was abysmal. I think he's lost his shot. I think if McGill is going to be on the Mets, in the future, it's going to be as a reliever. If he's a starter or anything else, he's going to be with another team. And then just to pull this up from Armand, Paxton is 8-2 with a 4.43 ERA. And like you said, some of the peripherals not so good, but they do have some better options, the Dodgers. Right now, the Mets may not have necessarily some better options. Maybe they might want to. I would kick the tires on Paxton. It's just money. And if he sucks, you could send him, pack in the way they did with Julio Teheran.
Yeah. And like you said, I think that there's a way, and I think that the market itself is going to dictate how they can go about this. And what I mean is, like you just said, Buto is a weapon in the pen. You could use him as a starter, but he's a weapon there. If you call up McGill for this start now, depending on what happens with the market, and say you go after a starter and you get a Quantrill or you get a Fetty or someone else that can be a starter, and then you could say, well, now that we did that, maybe we're not liking the price tags on some of these relievers. Maybe we can't get what we want. So then maybe we're going to kick McGill to the pen now. And then maybe we'll get an even lesser reliever to plug in of the Maton ilk that we'll get. And then we'll plug him into the pen to replace, some of the more dead spots within the bullpen. Like, I think that there's a way that you can really mold this, if you will, to where it can make sense, where you don't have to necessarily be only in one aisle, meaning I can only get a starter, I can only get a reliever. Like, there's a way you can make this work that helps you in two different areas.
Yeah, that was exactly my point. That's exactly where I felt that this needs to reside. Shout out to Douglas saying great show, LGM. We appreciate that. Darren also saying outstanding performance, gentlemen. Great work. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Nobody saying it is true. If you get a mid starter and a few bullpen arms, they could really cook. Just kind of agreeing with where we were going as far as that. Ricardo saying McGill is Mike Pelfrey 2.0. I actually think he's more like John Maine. Is the comparison I always make? Yeah, minus the licking.
Minus the licking.
The Mets-Yankees game is about to start.
It's going to win, baby.
Before we get out of here, we do need to get a win. Absolutely. And for everybody, by the way, if you're an out-of-market fan like me, the game is on ESPN, apparently. I just pulled up my MLB app, and it was like, you're blacked out. And I was like, fucking blackouts are stupid. Anyway, you have to watch it on ESPN. Ibby, is there one... What's your want? Give me your quick Christmas wish list, because next time we'll be doing this, Christmas will have come and gone, and you might get, Darren Ruff, which is like getting a pair of socks. You might get, I don't know, you might get Kyle Finnegan. Kyle Finnegan's like, I don't know, something useful, but not quite as boring as socks. I don't think the Mets are getting any new MacBook Pros. I don't think they're getting Brett Rooker or Luis Robert or something, but maybe, we can.
A lot of Temu stuff, a lot of stuff from Temu. I would say, because I'm going to stay in the lane that I've been in. If I'm going like high end and they get the three areas that they need, which is, I would say, a starter, a pen arm, and an outfielder, it would be like Jesse Winker, Eric Fetty, and Kirby Yates. Like, that's like high end in my opinion. If you gave me two of those, I would be very happy. Like, I think that that's kind of where I am in terms of want. Will they get all three? I don't know. But something along the lines of a lefty bat for the outfield, starter and reliever, or two relievers, something along those lines. That's kind of what I want. I gave you three names. I think that those are, even if they're not those exact names, like, that's the ilk that I'm looking for, because I think that the overall thought process for this front office is, we want to give these guys a chance. So we're going to supplement them with things that can help them, not so much add these superstars that we think are going to like push us to the moon. I think it's more so supplementing what we have and see what they can do and play with the house money.
I agree. I mean, you named three players, two of which I was going to name when I, kind of threw this back in my own court. Jesse Winker is not a star, but Jesse Winker makes so much sense for this team. It is insane. He's a left-handed hitting outfielder who's got a little bit of pop. He's got a little bit of a bounce back year in a limited role. I even think Winker can play a little bit of first base, which helps, you know what I mean? Just like a guy who can spell Alonso here or there. You could spell JD Martinez if they're facing a tough righty, you know, like right now Martinez and I know Martinez and Alonso and Lindor like to play every day or just about every day. But sometimes you got to just give a guy a rest and it's better for them. Yeah. And I think Winker helps them in a lot of different ways. I really do. I like Fedde because I like the prospect that Fedde can start or relieve. So, you know, he comes here, he's in your 6-man rotation, and then he slides back and he's in your bullpen, right? Like it allows you to be a little bit more flexible, especially if you really are a playoff team making a big time push. You're not going to have a 6-man rotation in the playoffs, and you're also going to take your best players with you. So, you know, Hauser's been mostly good in the bullpen, but if he turns back into a pumpkin and the Mets make the playoffs, well, now you've got, you know, Eric Fedde in the Adrian Hauser role, and that makes a lot of sense. You know, I think somebody like Kyle Finnegan makes a ton of sense. I've said him a million times, but you're right. Kirby Yates, David Robertson, I would even take, and I would even take 2 relievers and not necessarily a starter, like you said. Yeah. So I think for me, the wish list is 1 bat that is left-handed that can preferably play the outfield, in addition to whatever else they do, and 2 pitchers wherever they are. 2 relief pitchers, fine. A reliever and a starter, fine. They don't really need 2 starters, so that wouldn't make sense. But any machination of 2 pitchers makes a lot of sense. Armand saying I think they'll trade for Quantrill and David Robertson. I would take that. Give me a bat and we're okay.
And I just wanted to bring up Ricardo's comment because I know he said it multiple times. I wanted to bring it up saying Chad Green, AJ Puck. I want to say that it was Jeff Passan. I again, don't quote me, but I think he had mentioned Chad Green as a potential connection. Somebody did with a potential connection to David Stearns. I wouldn't mind it. I love AJ Puck. His stuff is absolutely filthy. And, you know, a big thing for him has always been his health. It's been a big issue. And he's kind of been, you know, moves back and forth a lot when it comes to starting and relieving. I know the Marlins tried to start him this year. It didn't really work out that well. Like I said, the stuff is there, but very wild at times. But I want to say over his last month, I think Daniel Wexler posted it before. He's been filthy, 30 strikeouts in 21 innings. It's been there. So it comes and goes, but if you want to take the shot and put him into the lab and see if you can get the most out of him, I would be all about someone like AJ Puck. So if that happens, I'd be 100% on board. But
are they both
yeah. Which one? No, I think Chad Green is Toronto. I want to say Toronto.
Yes.
So
Puck is still with the Marlins.
Puck is still with the Marlins. Yes. One final thing.
Some of those guys, man, they just so generic. Chad Green. You're like, wait, Chad Green. What team is Chad Green on? It's like trying to find a fucking needle in a haystack sometimes. You're like, haven't there been like 13 relief pitchers in the history of Major League Baseball named Chad Green?
Before we get out of here, obviously, shout out to the 134 that are with us. I know it kind of got mixed up with the Twitter, things like that. Shout out to all of you, all the love. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. We are at 790. We're 10 away from 800. It's a big milestone. So please make sure you subscribe to the channel. One final thing. You're 2 games away, Mets fans. You're 2 games away right now at the moment from the Atlanta Braves. Go out there tonight, Mets. Win a ball game against the Yanks. I don't care about the Subway Series. I care about getting the wins, okay? Beat this team. Handle Garrett Cole. Go out there and kick some ass. Then you got 4 games set with the Braves. That I don't want to say that that's your season. I don't want to say that, but it is a big, big, big series. Okay. You can do legit damage. If you want people to truly get 100% on board with you, that you're going to make some noise and you want David Stearns to buy for you and to add to you and help supplement and help you win ball games. This is your moment. You start off a little bit slow post All-Star break. You split with the Marlins. Fine. They'll take it. This 4-game set coming up. Handle business tonight. Don't look ahead. Handle business tonight. And go out there and then beat Atlanta. You control your destiny. You got to go out and do it. Let's go Mets.
You know, Ibby, everything you just said is so spot on with regards to how the Mets, I know that what we've talked about, it doesn't make or break the season. But if the Mets win tonight and the Mets go into the weekend strong against the Braves, you don't think David Stearns is like, I gotta do it. I gotta do it. You know, I gotta pull the trigger. I gotta go get something. Like I gotta reinforce these guys. And I think he's gonna do it anyway. But that is, you want it, you've done it. You did it all June. You did it for a good chunk of July. You came out a little sluggish. Finish strong with a week left until the deadline. Go and put the hammer down. That said, Ibby, this is an absolute blast. I know there's a coin flip chance that you may be with us next week and you may be not with us. Ibby's going on vacation next week. I don't expect him to, in the middle of his vacation, up and leave his family to talk Mets. But especially, I think if the Mets do something of significance at the deadline, Ibby's going to join us at least for a little bit and give his comments on that. So maybe I'm flying solo. Maybe I will bring in a guest. We'll see what happens. But anyway, I'm John. That's Ibby. This is Til Mets Do Us Part, all courtesy of the Brella Sports Network. We'll try to sort out everything with Twitter by next week so that we can be on Twitter and on YouTube. But of course, in about an hour, this episode is going to drop as an audio podcast. Wherever it is you get your podcast, don't forget about MANSCAPED. Don't forget about independent safes. We will see you guys next time. Like I said, I'm John. That's Ibby. Let's go Mets. Peace.